Hello, this is Michelle Senderson, and welcome to our BLS Leadership Series. Today, I am going to talk about business, travel, and tax deductions and how you can win. Again, I'm Michelle Senderson. I'm the CEO of Senderson Enterprises. I'm excited to be presenting on this forum today. I am a senior tax advisor with over 30 years experience, particularly focused in on personal income tax returns as well as a major focus in small business. So again, extremely excited to be on this platform today. And as we move forward, if you have questions, know that I am a resource to everyone in this community. Okay, so now for the reason I am here today is again to talk about business travel, but how to make it a smart tax strategy for you in your business. I will tell you that travel is a familiar topic, but it is often an area where small business owners leave dollars on the table. Over 90% of business owners actually overpay taxes because they miss deductions and they miss write-offs. So I am here to make sure that this does not happen. And this is the time that we change that. Because as you begin to prepare for filing next year, you want to make sure that you are able to write off as many items as you can. Again, the goal of this seminar is to better equip you with knowledge and the tools that you will need to identify what you can take as a deduction, maximize your tax savings, and remain IRS compliant. So let's get into the seminar. All right. Part of what I'm going to talk about today is, I mentioned before, in order to win, you need to know how to identify your legitimate business expenses, as well as you want to be able to apply the criteria and know what the IRS looks for, right? Because you want to make sure that you are taking deductions for things that you are allowed to take according to the IRS. That is always the caveat, what you are allowed to take. Then when you have this knowledge, you'll be able to implement cost strategies, right? We can plan, am I going to take a trip, right, for my business? Should I set an annual business trip? How do I combine business trips and personal trips together? What happens when we do that? So you will learn more as I go through this seminar. Also, I'm going to talk about how to maintain proper records, because I always say you want to be IRS audit proof. And we're going to continue. All right, so as I told you, my goal is to help you win. Now, I'm going to interject this. How many of you remember Oprah Winfrey years ago? This was one of her most infamous shows where she gave away cars to every audience member. Do you remember that? They were Pontiacs back in the day. And when Oprah gave those cars away, she said, you have a car, you get a car, right? And everyone in that audience won that day. No one went home empty-handed. So that's my goal today, is make sure when you leave here, you have at least one or two items that you can take as a win and apply as we move forward in this year. So you want to take all the tax advantages, right? 100% on travel, 100% in lodging. How do we get to meals? Generally, it's 50% on meals, Just depends on the complexity of the meals, right? We'll talk about meals later. And then you want to make sure you're taking 100% on incidentals. So 100% is our goal. That's the win as we move forward. Now, I talked about the IRS. So as a tax preparer, you want to make sure, right, when you go into have your taxes done, that you have actually identified the expenses that the IRS feels qualifies. But most of all, you want to understand the framework. So one thing that I would encourage is if you go to the IRS website, irs.gov, it's here on the screen. There is actually a publication that is totally built to discuss what qualifies for travel. Now, the reason I'm here is so that you don't have to go through all the pages. But I wanted to let you know that much of what is derived in this presentation comes from those pages. This publication is about 60 pages or so. So I'm going to hit highlights of it. But again, if you so desire, you can actually go to this publication as a small business owner. I would actually encourage you to do that, right? To learn more about what is available to you. All right, so let's talk about what's in the framework. The IRS says if you are on a business trip, right, they want to define what is a business trip. And it is a trip where you are there primarily for business activities. The second criteria the IRS has is it says that the individual traveling must be away from their tax home. Right, so your tax home is not your home where you reside. Well, it could be for some, right? For some small business owners, if that's where your office is, if that is where you primarily do business, then that is your tax home. But if you have an office, right, outside, we want to make sure that travel is considered that you are away. All right, and when you are away, the IRS states that you must be there for ordinary and necessary business, right? And we're going to talk a little bit more about ordinary and necessary as we move forward. And then as well as when you travel, the expectation from the IRS is that you are documenting and keeping a log of your business expenses. And that is normally the gotcha as to why many individuals leave dollars on the table. But I'm going to encourage you to document and log as we move forward. All right, so let's talk about the guidelines, right? Again, your primary purpose for business is business, and you can actually mix in personal. We will talk about that as well. But the major reason that you are leaving or you are traveling is for business, right? And here's where I want to talk a little bit more about ordinary and necessary. Is this really a trip for your business or for personal, right? Is it necessary to take the trip? Do you need to be there is it critical for your business that you attend this event? Or you go away for training. And there are more around necessary within the actual publication, but I won't go into that further here. So let's talk about qualifying travel expenses. This is where I want to make sure everyone understands what's available to you. All right, with transportation, I think this one is very clear. If you travel by air, right, your airplane ticket, your train tickets, those qualify. Your rental cars, or you drive your personal car with mileage, right? We know this is the world of Ubers and Lyfts. Make sure you are documenting when you take Ubers and Lyft. And those are easy because if you have the apps actually keep record of your trips. So this is one where documenting becomes fairly easy, right? We're going to look at the IRS also allows hotel stays, right? Or if you're in an Airbnb for business or any other type of related lodging, those qualify as well, including extended stays. So anywhere you go, if you're there for business, you want to make sure that you are documenting. You're going to hear me continue to say document as we go along. Your meals, generally the meals, if you spent $40 on a meal, 50% of that is deductible. There have been times in the IRS law where you can take 100%. So here's where we want to stay on top of what is the IRS, the criteria for meals at the time. You want to make sure that these are business meals. And the IRS defines a business meal as one of where you are conducting business. Now, I know someone's already thinking about this. What if you have someone in your family that works for you, right? So again, some meals that may be personal can actually be business. But in a business meal, you want to make sure that you are meeting someone and you're talking about activities surrounding your business or opportunities to grow the business, right? And then finally, incidentals. This one I think a lot of folks leave on the table because you are moving so fast, you forget about documenting these. But I would encourage, take a small book, take a small log, take your phones, and just stop and log. What you pay in tips and gratuities? Those are deductible. If you tip for baggage fees, right? The IRS recognizes that you are a business owner, so you need to stay connected, whether it be Wi-Fi on while you're traveling on air, anything for connectivity, you can deduct. All right, let's talk more about air and travel. Again, 100%. Those are the numbers that we want. Make sure you document as a business, right? Many businesses should have a resolution. So you want to make sure that you are writing down, I am going on this trip, right? The reason for the trip, who's on the trip. That's the type of documentation the IRS is stating should be in place, right? You want to make sure that that is there, because I cannot remember what I did yesterday. So remember, a best practice that I recommend to everyone is when you come back from that trip, sit down and kind of summarize, right? Here's the length of the trip, who was there, and so forth. We're also going to talk about rentals. You may go to a different state. Anytime you rent a vehicle, or even in your same state, if it's there to get you to a business function, you can actually deduct the cost of the rental. And don't forget the cost of the fuel, right? You can take that as a deduction. Just keep your receipts and make your log. We already talked about ground transportation. But the one thing that I do want to add, because this is important, it is in the IRS. Don't forget about when you are going, and I've seen this in conferences. You go back to the hotel, you ride back to the actual conference. Anytime you're going back and forth, those types of transit costs are an opportunity for you to take a tax deduction. Now, as we move forward on the personal vehicles, let me spend a little bit of time here, because interestingly enough, The IRS actually, when they built, right, the rules around personal vehicle and mileage, their intent was for individuals to use the standard mileage rate because it actually gives many an advantage. It's simple, and and all you have to do is keep track of the actual miles. But the gotcha is many folks, right, we're moving so fast that we are not keeping track of the mileage. So oftentimes when I do taxes, and I'll ask the question, well, how many miles did you drive in the year? No one has really kept a log, but they're very astute on keeping their actual expenses. So I'm going to encourage many here to really keep a log, because when you actually keep track of your mileage, it results in a bigger deduction. So I just want to give you that as a golden nugget, followed by this particular nugget. I think this one is really huge. The IRS is very big on, when you travel, what is deductible is actually the business portion, right? So let's just say you spent 4 days in Italy for a business trip, and then you spent 1 day for a personal, right? You decided to stay and do some sightseeing. Well, by the rules, 4 days, you can take the deductions for whatever you spent on your business, your lodging, etc. But when you went into that extra night, that would not be tax deductible. But here is an exception that the IRS has. So keep this in mind. If you go away internationally for more than 1 week and you spend less than 25% of your total time on non-business activities, you can actually deduct the entire trip. So again, if you go away for a week, it has to be at least a week, but you spend less than 25%, you can deduct the whole trip. So just think about that, right? And generally when someone travels internationally, right, the air, right, the time you're in the air, you can most likely really take advantage of that because you'll probably be in that particular country for more than a week. So I just wanted to share that as well. All right. I think we talked here about the lodging and the meals, but where I want to just kind of hone back in on is mixed purpose travel, right? This is where you combine leisure and you combine business. So just be careful here, again, with what you deduct, right? The business purpose, why you're traveling. So you can't really say, you can't go to Disneyland for 5 days and spend 4 days with Mickey and 1 day on business. It's not going to work. So you really have to remember, be careful on mixed purpose travel, and we'll talk about that as I go along. Okay, so this is where I'll go into incidentals, and then we'll go into one more area. So again, here's where we lose the dollars. Keep track of what you give hotel staff. Be generous, right? Give to your porters, etc. Right? You want to document though when you actually gave the tip, right? And what service was provided. Some other fees that you might forget is your baggage fees, right? Excess weight. How many of you, when you go to different businesses, you might be having to drag materials or books, right? Or things that you want to sell when you get there. Those are deductible, right? Also, when traveling on business, checking your luggage qualifies as well. Just keep your airline receipts or your credit card statements. And here's where I want to pause too with my small business owners. It is a best practice is to ensure you really are IRS audit proof is when you travel, get a debit card or a credit card that is solely used for your business. It's not tied to your personal accounts, and it's there so that way when you go on that particular trip, use that card continuously. So that way, even if you're not consistently documenting, remember, many of the banks now have downloadable where you can get your statement. It will categorize items for you. So that's a wonderful thing. So I just want to remind folks that there are things in place to help us get better at documentation. And I talked about this earlier, connectivity, the hotel internet. You may find yourself at a business conference and then you need to communicate back to someone at your office. You might not have all the equipment or computers or your iPad, and you need to use a business center. All of that is deductible, right? But again, it has to be for your business. All right, so here's where, before I go into here, I want to talk about some travel expenses. And I'm going to actually show you this from the IRS Pub 463, because I don't want to miss anything out on what I talked about with travel. So I'm just going to hit some highlights, and this is directly from the pub, right? So when you travel, one of the gotchas is if you actually purchase a ticket, an airline ticket, but you use frequent traveler points, right, or credit card, you do not want to deduct that particular cost, right? Because that's a double dip, and that's a no-no with the IRS. So that is a gotcha. I just wanted to make sure I mention that. The IRS says, I will actually allow you to deduct anytime you have a cost. If you did not have a cost, then you cannot put that down when you file your tax returns. We're also going to talk about, again, the taxis. Taxis also include black cars. They include airport limousines. It also involves commuter buses. So I want to make sure I mention that, right? As well as baggage and shipping. We talked about that as well. But if you're actually you're going to attend or go to an event and you need to ship something ahead of time so that you're not carrying those materials on the plane, that is deductible. One of the other items is when we talk about meals. So again, we have to be careful with meals. The IRS says if your business trip is overnight or long enough that you need to sleep or rest to perform your duties, then any meals that you then take are deductible. So be careful with meals. They generally look for overnight trips to be deductible, right? And when you're staying at a hotel, don't forget about your dry cleaning and your laundry. If you need to use hotel services for that, it is obviously deductible. And last thing is, I'll just add, if there's anything, if you have to use fax machine costs, copy costs while you're away, if you didn't make enough copies of your materials, you have to run to write a FedEx or a Staples or someplace to make copies. All of those are deductible. All right, so let's go back. Let's continue. On the screen now, I wanted to talk about conferences because in this, and actually in this forum, and now and where we are today, many of the in-person conferences are now budding. They're all over the place in different states. And so where you can take advantage of going in person, obviously you want to do so. So I wanted to let this forum know that the things that are deductible are, one, your registration fees. They are 100% deductible. If you have to pay for conference materials or books, or the person that runs the event says you have to do a certain, you have to look at something, or something costs you $1, you want to make sure you document that so that when you file, you again have your tax write-off. I want to though caution you that if you, for conferences, there are some rules around conferences. If you leave the United States, I would encourage you to go and take a look at Pub 463. There just are some additional rules that the IRS likes: substantiation of the business purpose. So what they will say is it something that is required or directly tied to your business that you cannot have it done here in the United States, but you're leaving, right, to actually attend that conference outside of the United States. So if there is a readiness test, and you just want to make sure that you can answer those questions. And the last part with conference types also is, this is the part where I say be careful. Conferences around investments, political activities, social events that are unrelated to your business are not eligible. So you want to be careful there. So attend the conference. Just make sure that you do not deduct that on your return. All right, so this one is a fun one. I don't know how many people have actually taken cruise ships for business events, but this is actually in the pub and it's available. It is a business owner. You actually are allowed up to $2,000 per year to take a convention or a seminar on a cruise ship. So this can be pretty exciting. If you've never done this, here's something for consideration. However, the one caveat with the IRS is that the actual cruise ship can only, you can only take the cruise as long as the ports of call are within the United States, right? They're defined as a U.S. state. So just be careful there, right? Enjoy the cruise, but remember the eligibility says you can only travel within the U.S. And for this, cruise ship documentation is a little more rigid. The IRS requires that when you if you are attending a business event on a cruise, you want to make sure that you connect with the individual who is the sponsor of the event. You want to get a written agenda of what is covered, right, during that event. Is it, leadership seminars? You want to actually make sure you have a copy of that, and then proof of where you attended certain events. So this one has a little more rigor around it. So be careful here, but enjoy the cruise. Let's talk about travel insurance. Very popular. Travel insurance is, well, let me talk about the considerations, because there are a couple of ways we can look at travel insurance. So the first is cancellation of the trip. That is not eligible. So you can actually purchase that as a business, but it is not eligible for reimbursement or deductibility rather with the IRS. You also want to, the same goes with emergency travel. This is not deductible. But what is deductible, right, is if you actually engage and get medical insurance premiums for your trip. That is fully deductible. As a business owner, you can take those costs and add them into your log of expenses that you can get cared for. Documentation. This is it. This is the key to it all. Great documentation helps you win. So you have to keep receipts, right? And I often laugh with clients because if you really think about paper receipts, what happens when you keep them over time? They begin to turn. So you want to make sure you keep receipts. You keep canceled checks. Yes, the IRS still requires that. But again, as a small business owner, I mentioned this up front. You want to make sure that you keep track on that one debit card or that credit card for your business. That is a great way to help support documentation. You want to also maintain those trip records. Write the trip out. Put everything together, right? Who attended on the trip? Was it my employees? Name the employees. How many employees went? All of this you want to make sure you have as documentation. We call it the what, the W's, right? The who, what, when, why, where, and so forth. That is, so if you can answer all those questions, you have done a stellar job relative to documenting your trip. You also want to make sure you categorize, right? Keeping yourself organized with your categories. When you come and you're ready to file, this will be available to you. You won't have to sort through tons of paper. I also encourage many folks, just because so many of us have Excel, right? The Microsoft Office suite of products. Use Excel. Keep tabs are organized. And last, right, for those my techie folks, I encourage you to leverage apps and software, right? Because there's apps that actually have focus in on travel. And then there's also just with your phone, you could take copies of receipts. There's so many storage items. So this is the age where using digital tools is fantastic. It saves you time. So I encourage the use of digital tools. All right. So now if you're a small business owner, you probably say, well, Michelle, how do I get my money, right? How do I maximize and how do I report these deductions? So remember, as you continue to keep track of all those wonderful tax deductions throughout the year, when it is time to file as a self-employed individual, sole proprietor, you generally will be reporting those deductions or getting credit for the deductions on the Schedule C, which is here on the slide. And you'll notice I circled in part 2, right? Item number 24, you can report travel and meals. And then there's also another section on the Schedule C where you can actually list other expenses. So that is where you would list the expenses. But what's so key about expenses with a small business is that it allows you to lower your taxable income. So the benefit of keeping track is lowering. At the end of the day, I have a way to lower my income and use those dollars to pay for other items in your business or allow you to do things to help you grow the business. So you want to make sure that you're getting every dollar that you can regarding travel. Now, there are absolutely, there are tons of other deductions, which is actually would be another seminar. So I won't go into that, but you want to make, again, sure that you're getting every dollar and you're winning. All right, so we talked about detailed records, but one of the ones is logs around. And the logs, when I think of logs, I'm really talking about mileage. This is the one where I told you many individuals do not capture mileage, but in many of the new cars in the last 2 years, the cars now capture your trips. So you can have some cars do downloadables, and the cars are getting smarter and smarter, so they're even helping you. There's also apps that are available that you can actually that will monitor your trips, right? And it'll help you with the who, what, why did I go to that one? What date did I do it? Here's a definite area where I would delve into apps, or right, facilitate the use of my car if your car has one, and it will do the work for you. Absolutely keep track. All right, if you have a corporation, or partnerships, you want to report your expenses under the ordinary business expense section. Your tax preparer will know where that's at. But again, when you walk through the door, don't bring in a bag of receipts. Just bring in a wonderful Excel spreadsheet or your QuickBooks where you have documented what you feel are your deductions, and walk in with confidence because you know it's something you're entitled to. All right, so here's where I want to talk about before we get here, let's just talk a little bit. I want to hit this subject because it's generally a gotcha. Is be careful of entertainment. So within the tax laws, years ago, you could actually deduct entertainment. And that was moved out of the tax laws somewhere around 2017. So I don't want to say entertainment cannot be deducted in certain scenarios. So for example, if you are a fashion coordinator and you create a fashion show with, you actually commingle that with dinner for the client, and then it follows with a fashion show event, that potentially could qualify, right? It kind of borderlines entertainment. But if you're the fashion coordinator and this is how you advertise, then it becomes a deduction. But entertainment, for example, I might have some Swifties and I might have the folks with the Beehive, right? If you go to see Beyonce and it is truly a personal trip, it is not deductible. It is not, it is really not deductible. So you want to be careful with entertainment. That is a gotcha. The other part is, I'm trying to think of other IRS flags, but I think entertainment is one that we tend to see. And that is one that will catch the eye of an auditor to say, well, why is this entertainment necessary? All right, so let's talk about that. This is actually a knowledge check about personal and business. So I'm going to give an example here and tell me what you think. All right, so Sam actually took his family on a trip to Maui, and while he was there, he met a client doing an excursion. He decided that since he was there, right, and the client was there, he offered to take the client to lunch the next day. So here's my question. Can Sam deduct lunch with his client for that particular, for the next day. So tell me what you think. Okay, so the answer is, although Sam is there on vacation, he can actually take that because that's a business lunch, and they will be talking and conversing about the business, right? It's his client, and he could actually deduct that. Okay, so if you got that right, very good. All right, what about family dinner? So after Sam had lunch with Ted, later that evening, he had dinner with his family. Now, is that deductible? I feel like I need the Jeopardy. Do. I feel like I need that. All right, so the answer here is Sam cannot deduct dinner with his family, right? That is a personal event, right? With his family, it's dinner. Now, again, I sort of hit on this earlier in the seminar. One of the strategies that I talked about, and again, that is another seminar, is many small business owners. One of the ways that you can maximize other expenses is hiring either your children or someone in your family to support your business activities. But when you do so, right, you must document what their role is, right, what they do for the business, how much they are paid, right? And when you pay them, if they're small children, it has to go into an account where the money is transferred from you into a different account that they own. So this family dinner, though, with Sam, no one works in this business, so the dinner is not deductible. All right, so let's go to the last question. It says, can Sam write off his airfare and lodging? What are the thoughts here? All right, so if you were listening earlier, the IRS says, right, when you take a trip, the purpose of the trip must be business in order to deduct your costs. So in this case, Sam, when he went to Maui, his intent was purely for pleasure. So in this case, his airfare and lodging are not a write-off, but he has, of course, enjoyed the wonderful island of Maui. Okay, so we have hit the end of the seminar. I want to thank USPAACC. I want to thank the invite to come here and talk about travel. I'm also offering myself as a resource to the members and any of the viewers who register for this course. If you have questions or you just simply want to stay connected, you will see on the screen the way to email me or connect with me in LinkedIn. I also want to offer to anyone who registered through this wonderful community, right, through the USPAACC, that if I'm offering to you 15 minutes of free consultation session. If you want to talk about some things you heard today, if you want to talk about some other strategies, I am there. And you now have, as a gift from me to you, a free 15-minute to engage, to talk. I'd love to hear from you. You was just simply, if you look at the bottom of that slide, there is my Calendly link. That is the way to connect with me. As well as I told you when I started, I am actually a tax preparer, and after 30 plus years in the industry, I am here again to help you win. So if you find yourself in a need for services, I am there as well. So knowledge is power. I wanted to make sure that I share with you some items. Hopefully you picked up an item or two. There's so many more. We just don't have time to cover everything. But if you did have a question around travel, again, feel free to connect with me. And again, I thank each and every one for your time and spending with me. I enjoyed it and look forward to talking with you soon. Again, I thank each and every one of you. Have a good day. Bye-bye.